What a different game that would have been.
Yes, it was a very different game, and I had something like this in every dimension. For example, on the farming side, I had a link over to the people. So the people are now black with the king, and the farming is blue. And I had the rule: if there were more people than there was farming tiles in the kingdom, then they didn't have enough to eat, and therefore they would start a revolt, and therefore some people would starve, and the leader would be kicked out, and the kingdom would actually be shaken from the inside.
And of course, historically, that would have been very accurate.
That would have been very accurate. Now, one of the challenges in developing a game and trying to make a kind of a model also, or some reflection on the historic development, is to select what you can take and what you cannot take. The problem was not only that the game was 3 or 4 hours long, the problem was also there was a lot of counting involved. Because you had constantly to count how many people do I have, how much farming do I have for them, how strong is the leader against the religion, and it was very mathematical. And I decided I didn't want to have this, and therefore what I did is I phased these things out. Particularly I didn't want to put it into the region of a war game anyway, so I tried to keep the war dimension out and only have it come indirectly, because of course war was important for that period. And I tried to bring in the more positive stuff, and that was when the idea of the monuments developed, and say, oh, that is actually something three-dimensional which can grow on the board. And of course, to the monuments, I can link several dimensions because they become two-colored, and that then seemed to be the right way to go.
And through all this, it's all kind of comes together by simplifying your global picture of how you had planned to design this and keep bringing it in tighter.
Yeah, I mean, for me, there are always two phases. One, the first phase is before I have a prototype. That's the initial ideas and rules where I need to make sure that I get a lot of innovative rules. It's always easy to have 1 or 2 or 3 principal ideas and then to fill the rest with standard stuff, and you get a game which is half standard and half innovative. I think the big challenge is every gap you have, everything you need to solve it in some kind of a new way, and also in a way which is in harmony with what you already have. And the major part then of the testing is to really see if that all flows naturally and is somewhat intuitively. Yes, of course, if I didn't know how to do it, I would do it this way, and to also make sure that the rules remain relatively simple because it all follows the same system. Some people call that abstract in a way because they try to have a lot of varieties and they have 10 different things and the 10 different features all work differently. And it's just a different philosophy. You can do it and you get a very different game with lots of rules, lots of complexity in there. But in my eyes, and that's my personal view, is in my eyes, this complexity actually keeps you almost a bit away from the game because you need to master all these rules. I want to give you easy rules, but then give you the challenges that there is a depth of play through these easy rules.
Well, I have to tell you, 10 years ago, I would have told you that I would have liked to play the first version of this game. Yeah. But as time becomes very precious, and my friends seem to agree, it's this type of a game that we can complete in 1 to 1.5, maybe 2 hours. Yeah. That is so satisfying because it's so rich in strategy and yet plays in 2 hours.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I for a long time I had the saying, a game which is longer than an hour is unplayable. I mean, that was in a jokey way, but it is that my preference is when I sit down in the evening and play games, I'd rather like play 2 or 3 games. If I want the same one, but I have a new chance to get in something involved in something new, then play the long one. But that's very much a matter of taste. But as that is my preference, that's also expressed, of course, in my game.
I'm just wondering how all this ties into what some people consider a trilogy of what you've done in these games that we've mentioned in some of the previous episodes. How does all that relate, or does it relate afterwards more than during?
Yeah, that's a very, very interesting point because Tigris and Euphrates was finally released in Germany 2.5 years after I started the initial development by Hans im Glück. That was in Essen, 1997. And that was the first game of this trilogy, as people call it. Now, the interesting point is, I never designed it as a trilogy. I never called it a trilogy. I've never seen it as a trilogy. That was purely made up from the outside, where people looked at it and said, oh, this is a trilogy. That was always planned. It was not planned in a conscious way. However, I think there is a bit of truth behind it, because when I go into a new field of design, and that's with respect to Euphrates and Tigris, that was a lot of exploring new territories. Then, of course, it's like opening a new drawer, developing a new network. And with this network, you see another dimension of games. And that means when you go and do a different type of game, you then have a very rich field in there where you can draw from. And therefore, I think Tigris and Euphrates, in a way, was the kickoff in my mind to have essentially paved the path to go in this direction, and it makes it easier for me to do the other games. And therefore, the other two, that is Through the Desert and Samurai, then followed probably along the path which I had already explored. Of course, it's very different mechanics, but also as tile-laying games.